time on Kustom Works, we're finishing the dash on the 60s Kustom, the A40. Gonna get that dash all finished up. Let's get to the workshop. So, the dashboard, I put this piece of MDF around the edge just to make my rebated edge there. And now what I'm going to do, all of this, I'm going to fill with literally an ungodly amount of filler. So, get that on, smooth it out, and then we can start looking at the aluminium insert. But first, Bondo time! All the filler's dry. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with this. Good thing we're using MDF inside the car to make little mouldings like this is it sands up about the same rate as the filler, so you really can sculpt around it. Get a mask on, let's get that extractor on, let's do some sanding. Dashboard's going good, sanding's going really well, everything's looking quite nice. Still a few pits and stuff. I've just got to fill in a little bit where the plastic pipes broke through, but a bit more filler on that. Should sort it out. There's one point on this. Doing internal curves like this, that are sort of sunken in, is really difficult. However, there is an easy way. If you always make them the same diameter as the angle grinder, and we can see here, they're a lot easier to sand. This one's not finished yet, but it's just nice and easy. And with that edge of that angle grinder disc, you can get things about there. Then with some 40 grit, just go in, and sand it by hand. Although just to sand an inner radius by hand can be really difficult. So, if possible you can, go for the disc. Always remember, you could use an old grinding disc that got down to a smaller radius, or if you're doing something really big, there's always a 9-inch grinder. But then again, there is always a 9-inch grinder, isn't there? Oh yeah. This is looking pretty good. It's nearly sanded. There is one thing though, a few bits of woolly fiberglass around here. We've got some exposed MDF. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to give it a couple of coats of fiberglass resin. That'll, stick it all together. Then I'll give it a flat, and then we'll see what kind of finish we're going to put on this. Okay then, so first up I'm going to cut this out of dye bond. That'll make it, nice and strong, and there's going to be no rattling or anything when it's going along in the car. And also, because it's aluminium and dye bond, nice and easy to use a hole saw to cut in the dials and put in the switches that we're going to have in the car. Here we go, aluminium insert. Now, I've not actually made an aluminium insert, I've just took all the paint off of a piece of dye bond. And you know what, that looks good enough. What I will do with this though, I'll just go once more over it with a 320 before I bond it in, and I'll give it a quick coat of 2K, because I know it's aluminium, it don't go rusty, but it will always fingerprint and it will always look a bit grubby. So, matte 2K, And then we'll cut all the switches in and put the very few dials in it that this car's going to have. Because remember, no dials, no worries. So, if you think back to the beginning of this, the whole reason we made this with all its thing, so it fits and it looks nice, but also it's got to demist that windscreen. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to drill some holes in the top of here, and that's where the air will come out to demist the windscreen. And also there is a small matter, I'm sure it's not going to become a problem as the project goes on, but I've not actually linked this up to any air at the minute. So somehow I'm going to have to tap into the back and link it up to the air that will blowing out of the heater into the tube and then demist the windscreen. But at the minute, I don't know I'm going to do that. But hey, let's drill some holes. I'm sure it'll all come to me. What could go wrong? Okay, so that's the holes drilled, and it's pretty rough. I've got some like chipping on here, so I will be going back to do an extra bit of sanding and a little bit of filling just to make sure they all look right. But when that sits in, hot air will go up the windscreen. Windscreen sits about at that angle, so that is definitely going to hit it. So now I'm going to look at some way of actually getting the air in there. Of course, after I've covered up these chips and stuff. So I drilled a hole, I've drilled into that piece of pipe that's in the top of the dash for the demister, and via this little bit of very much modified pipe, I've got airflow into there. Obviously there was a gap here, I've covered it in some silver tape. What I'm going to do is glass over this now so it's super strong for when we link onto it. And that's it, that's that part of the dash done. We've got this, the vent that we fitted, and that's all dry now. Fiberglass is all dry, that goes in and blows through these holes. And we've got something good to attach to and something that doesn't interfere with anything behind the dashboard. I've also put these 3 gauges in, so speedo, temperature and fuel. And this now fits in and screws back to these brackets. Now the brackets that I've made here, these are just this is just the start of a framework. I'll probably put a bit more in, but I've cut these pieces of flat, welded them to the correct angle, then I've drilled and tapped them, and this just screws in. There we have it, it's in, it fits up nicely to the windscreen here. I did have to remask and backfill this just a little bit on the edges, just to get that to have that really nice fit. And now what I've got to do, essentially, is find out where first the gauges need to go, and then there's going to be a whole bank of toggle switches on here in that sort of 60s gasser drag race way. Lots of toggle switches, lots of labelling on that thing, which I don't know what it's called. Everything labelled. Also, it looks like a dragster from the 60s. what I've done, I've drilled the holes for the instruments, hole for a cigarette lighter, the holes for all these super cool old school switches. Those in there. Turbo boost, man! Yeah, so that's all going to be good. And then what I've done, I've gone around the outside here, put these little stainless countersunk screws in there. And that will enable us, when this is on here, that this part will be fitted to the car. This part will undo these, 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 screws. And this will come away so we can work on any wiring, anything like that. And then pop that back in there. Now that I've drilled all these holes, I'm going to DA off all these markings with some 320 paper. And I'll go over this with a 2K matte clear, and that'll just stop the aluminium fingerprinting, because it'll just fingerprint forever, you know, it'll never look good. This dash panel that we've been making, it's now been lacquered in a 2K clear, and it really has got that just dull aluminium look to it, just like a dash would have been. All these holes are exactly right for these toggle switches to go through. You know, when there's a whole bank of those, the action's so nice on them. I do love this kind of switch. It seems so mechanical and purposeful. But there's going to be a whole bank of those, and they're all going to be individually labelled. It's going to look really cool. Also, we've got a hole for the ignition, and we've got a hole for a cigarette lighter, sat nav, whatever. These gauges that sort of came with the car just look so nice in it as well. So I know it's not the finished thing, but they do look pretty good in there. And we're just going to have speedo, water temperature and fuel gauge, probably have an oil pressure light as well. Keep it really minimal and really simple, and then the wiring's simpler as well. So this is a dash, sanded up and finished, and I've painted it in truck bed liner, but the truck bed liner that comes in an aerosol can. It's a lot finer, and it gives this almost sort of flock sort of finish to it. I'm really pleased with it. It's come out really good. So that goes there, and then that fits in there. Yeah, even if I do say so myself, I think it's come out pretty good. And definitely when it's in the car, it really does look the part. You can see the gauges nicely, where the switches will be cool. And yeah, one bit finished and about 1 million to go on that project. All the wiring's being done at the moment, and the wiring's being done by hot rod and custom building legend Lee Cox. And hopefully he'll get all the wiring done on this, and then we can look to getting the car sort of moving towards MOT and being on the road and actually driving. That's it for this time. Next time we're going to be looking at that massive removable roof on the meat wagon, which I'm sure is going to be a nightmare to build, but I'm going to love every minute. Between now and then, don't forget, big thumbs up, that bell thing, subscribe, and leave comments down below. Until next time, thank you very much and good night!